Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. It feels like afternoon. On behalf of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body, welcome to our June General Session meeting here in beautiful Salt Lake City. Thank you for your attendance and your interest in the matters before the governing body. They are always appreciated. And as always, public comments are welcomed. And a special thank you to WEC for hosting us and allowing us to meet in your offices. We're grateful and appreciative of your hospitality. And it just seems appropriate to be meeting here. This is our first regional meeting since sometime in 2019, which predates my attendance on the governing body. And being in the sort of the central end of the West and being the heart of reliability, it is a great way to start our regional meetings once again. At this point, I'm going to turn to Greg Fisher, Corporate Counsel, for our roll call.
Thank you. Member Campbell?
Here.
Member Decker?
Here.
Vice Chair Gardner?
Here.
Chair Kanzioka?
Here.
Member Prescott?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If you were looking at the agenda, you'll notice that welcome remarks was 15 minutes. So I have more than maybe a standard welcome to everyone. First, I'd like to start off with special recognition of two people here. One is we have Joe Edo off to my left over here. He represents the Board of Governors and he's in attendance at our meeting today. And it's wonderful that we have someone from the Board of Governors attending our meeting. The second person I'd like to recognize is WEC President and CEO Melanie Fry. She is our host today, and she will be on the agenda later to share some insights on WEC priorities. I guess I should say everybody is special, and everyone is welcome, but I did want to make that particular point. Brittany already covered a safety, and I'd like to cover one more. I came prepared with a safety moment meeting, and many of you are familiar with your companies having that. And this has to do with traffic safety. So when you think about it, everyone knows how to use a traffic signal, I believe. You know, one is red is stop. Yellow means slow or stop and proceed with caution. Green means no, go. Green means there's power to the intersection. And over 250,000 red light running accidents occur annually in the US. That's a lot. It means that when you enter an intersection, even on a green, please be cautious and don't assume cars are stopping, especially when the light initially changes and you're the first one at the intersection. I would like to address some WEIM accomplishments and highlights over the past 12 months. Because we are electing a new chair, I think it's a good time to reflect a little bit. And when I cover these, I don't want you to have the perception that these are governing body items or just staff items or just participant items. These are collective items. And I think they're important to go because a lot has happened in just the last 12 months. I'd like to first start with, we have 3 new participants that joined and went live in April. And that was El Paso Electric, Western Area Power Administration, the Desert Southwest Office, and Avangrid. We will hear some a presentation on net benefits again. And reminder of how far we've come in the last 12 months. So the aggregate net savings to WEIM participants, remember we were looking just a year from previous of getting to the $3 billion mark. We blew past the $3 billion mark. And that threshold achieved, as you saw in the news release, probably hitting $4 billion by the end of June. And so when we take a look at the change in the last 12 months, we've gone from 2.39 billion at the end of second quarter last year to somewhere around $4+ billion second quarter of this year. That's really phenomenal, which certainly indicates that this is the pathway for annual aggregate savings to the participants of over $1 billion. When I joined the governing body at the beginning of 2020, the accumulated benefits had not even achieved 1 billion at that point. So we've gone from under 1 billion to 4 billion plus in 3.5 years. I find that staggering, and think about this too, that there are now over twice as many participants from the beginning of 2020 to now. And there's still room and opportunity for more. And I know that staff is working on that. Another item that we talked about a year ago was reinitiating the regional meetings. And I'd like to say we're here. As I noted before, the last one was sometime in 2019. And this is something that we want to ensure that we continue to do to make certain that we are having a presence in the regions and providing opportunities for those who may not normally be able to attend to be here, and also for us to do outreach within those areas. Other things that are of really significant notice in the last 12 months is in this last year, we had the first in-person joint authority meeting between the Board of Governors and the governing body, and that occurred in February of this year. Another key change is we had the implementation of the governing body market experts. Susan Pope is right over here. If you want to raise your hand, you'll be on the, so everyone knows you're here. And that was an item, if you recall, that was a result of action and recommendations by the Governance Review Committee. We had the implementation of the governing body Regional Issues Forum liaison, and that currently is Anita Decker. And we saw that as a need that was similar to the outreach that the governing body was doing with the body of state regulators. And we thought that would improve our relationship. And I think that has gone a long ways, and it's been very positive. Some of the approval items that are of significance, back in December of 2022, there was the approval of the resource sufficiency phase 2. Again, that was another tough one, I know, for everybody, but it got there. Another one that I know that some don't like to talk about was the transmission system and marketing priorities that occurred in February. That was another challenge in getting that right balance, and one that initially had been planned for 2022, but it was delayed until February to get it right and really zero in on getting that balance. And then, of course, ones that everyone recall is the approval of EDAM in February and the approval of DAME in May. And then the last approval item I wanted to touch on was by the Governance Review Committee. The approval of the phase 3 changes, and that was approved in February. And a special shout out to two people. One is Rebecca Wagner and the other is Therese Hampton. And I would hope that everyone here would just have a little bit of a reflection on the contributions that Therese made in building that momentum and getting the mindset and culture for the Governance Review Committee and for us and moving things forward. And I believe that her work will continue to shine within the things that we do. And of course, when you think about how do you get there and all those accomplishments, there's a lot of appreciation to go around. And so first, I would like to start with the Cal ISO staff. The executive team is very good for us and working with us. It is a good relationship. The policy team, they take a lot of beatings from us. And I'm sure there's more emails and phone calls than they would like to think about. There's the legal team, and I apologize for the phone calls and emails that go through. And then lastly, with respect to staff, is the corporate secretary team, and specifically Stacy, Bernard, and Christina Osborne. They are so busy, and I know that, yeah. You know, and we know that they just tie so much together. And you know, if things ever look good on our end, it's because they're getting us there. The second group I'd like to notice is the participants and stakeholders. You know, this is very well-driven processes, and the input sometimes is tough to accept, but it's always valuable. The involvement in the development of initiatives is really has been significant. I mentioned some of those approval items, and each one of those was difficult, and they did not come without a lot of work that was done by the stakeholders. They shared valuable perspectives with written comments, and we all know we go through them, and when you start going through each of those approval items, 300 to 500 pages of comments, you know that a lot of effort was put into making those submittals and to really make their points. And it's really important, at least to me, and I believe with all the governing body members, to really appreciate and to understand why they are submitting those comments and making their points. The meetings, briefings, and letters, numerous. And what I would like to say to participants and stakeholders is I hope you believe you've been heard and that your input was considered and that your involvement shaped the outcomes that were eventually brought to the Board of Governors and governing body. The next I'd like to notice here is the body of state regulators. You know, they represent the entire West, and they have their challenges just like others in trying to develop consensus ideas from all the states. And the states have some pretty different perspectives on where we should go and really what things should look like. And their work on principles, guidance, and comments on key initiatives is greatly appreciated. And I'd like to note that the chair of the BOSHR is here and will be on the agenda a little bit later on. The next is the Governance Review Committee, and that's really for bringing phase 3 to reality. The nominating committee, you know, they have been busy every single year and for researching and vetting to ensure that the governing body has highly qualified candidates to meet the needs and vision of the stakeholders. And we'll have an agenda item on their latest work on later this morning. The Regional Issues Forum, once again, they'll be on the agenda this morning, and it's for their re-engagement in implementing the new authority that was recommended by the GRC and submitting its first set of comments to the governing body in implementing that new authority. And we recognize how difficult that is because pretty much all the members of the Regional Issues Forum are working for their companies, submitting comments separately. And so for that group to take the time and effort to pull that together is very commendable. We know it's a very difficult road to go down. And then lastly, my governing body colleagues, one is for their ongoing support, sharing their independent perspectives, and very, very importantly, to continually making the work of the governing body more effective, engaged, informed, and responsive. And with that, I think everyone here knows that this is Jennifer Gardner's last meeting. She's not able to stay on the governing body and we'll need to replace her. But she has been a very valuable partner on the governing body. And Jennifer, if you don't mind, we have a resolution we'd like to propose. I will ask, pardon me, I will ask one of the governing bodies to make the motion. But let me read this. Whereas Jennifer Gardner was appointed to the Western Energy Imbalance Market governing body for a term starting July 1st, 2021, and whereas Ms. Gardner served faithfully and enthusiastically during her tenure, including holding leadership positions of vice chair, and whereas Ms. Gardner took a leadership role on behalf of the governing body as the first governing body market expert liaison. In this role, Ms. Gardner developed criteria, RFPs, selection evaluation, contracts, onboarding, guidance, and interface processes with the market expert. This required significant knowledge and skill, as well as untold hours and dedication to the governing body and the market expert. And whereas, prior to being appointed to the governing body, Ms. Gardner served as a valued member of the nominating committee, where she worked diligently, leveraging her unique expertise and perspective to ensure the selection of qualified governing body candidates. And whereas, I know, we wanted to share this. Prior to being appointed to the governing body, Ms. Gardner served for 18 months on the Governance Review Committee, where she played a leadership role both within the committee and in stakeholder outreach in connection with the developing of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 governance proposals that were ultimately adopted and successfully placed into effect. And whereas Ms. Gardner used her unique consulting, legal, public interest organization expertise in the electric sector to help facilitate remarkable growth and effectiveness of the WEIM. And whereas Ms. Gardner made significant extra efforts to conduct outreach to participants and stakeholders throughout the Western region in order to understand their unique perspectives. And whereas Ms. Gardner presided as a governing body member in the approval and implementation of joint authority between the CalISO Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body. And whereas Ms. Gardner has encouraged improved Western regional coordination as part of approving the extended day-ahead market. And whereas Ms. Gardner's voice of reason and quiet questioning often surface key issues to the benefits of the WEIM and WEIM governing body members. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Western Energy Imbalance Market governing body members hereby express their utmost appreciation and sincerest gratitude to Jennifer Gardner for her outstanding service and dedication to the Western Energy Imbalance Market and its many participants and stakeholders in furtherance of expansion and success of the market. Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, aye. Approved.
Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you. Yeah, I agree with you.
Can I just make a comment quickly?
Mark, absolutely.
Okay. Well, first off, on behalf of Elliot, I really want to express the appreciation on behalf of Elliot and the staff for your engagement, your leadership throughout the years, not just in your role on the governing body. It'll be missed, but appreciate your questioning and challenging us to get to the right place. So really appreciate that. And Rob, I want to also express appreciation to the entire governing body. It was a great synopsis of what has happened in the last 6 months, the successes we've had. I know as staff, we're on to the next thing. We're thinking about where we're going forward, but it's really good to review what we've accomplished in the past. And we couldn't have done that without the governing body's leadership and support and outreach. It was critical to the success. So thank you.
Mark, thank you. And yeah, we are all appreciative. And we again, it is really, really significant. And I hope this continues to see a path forward and doing bigger and better things. So now I would like to move into our next agenda item, which is public comment. So I'm first going to look in the room here to see if there's anyone in the room that wants to make a public comment. And this would be for items not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. I'm going to go to Candace, who is our operator today. Candace, can we see if there's anyone who is on the line that would like to make public comments?
Absolutely. For those online, to join the queue, please click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen. You may need to move your cursor to make the toolbar appear. If you have joined us by phone only, please press #2 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. There are no raised hands at this time.
Candace, thank you very much. So we will move on. So next is agenda item 2, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from May 16th. And I'm going to turn to Greg Fisher on that.
Thank you. So we'd like to get a motion for approval of the May 16, 2023 general session minutes.
So moved.
Okay, Decker moved.
Second.
Second by Campbell. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion passes. Minutes approved. Thank you.
Kind of nice we're in public here. We don't have to do it individually.
I thought that through, Rob. Don't worry.
Before moving on to agenda item 3, I'd just like to note that we'll begin our meeting today with updates on the latest activities from both the BOSSR and the RIF, Body of State Regulators and Regional Issues Forum. We'll next hear a presentation on West-wide transmission activities from CAISO. This will be followed by a presentation on WEC key priorities. We'll then address the recommendations from the nominating committee on governing body members. Subsequently, the governing body will then select a new chair and vice chair for the next 12 months. And then lastly, we will hear from staff on the first quarter benefits for 2023 and an updated outlook on the governing body 2023 planning calendar. So this concludes my opening remarks. So our next agenda item is agenda item 3 and is an update from the Body of State Regulators activities from Utah PSC Chair and BOSSR Chair, Thad LeVar.
Except I can't see people over here, but that works. Good morning, Chair Conziolco, Vice Chair Gardner, and members of the Western EIM governing body. My name's Thad LeVar, and I'm the chair of the Body of State Regulators for the WEIM, and I'm happy to give you an update on our activities since your last meeting, and also say welcome to Utah. Somebody ordered good weather for the days you were here, even though you're spending all your time inside. As Chair Conziolco just walked through, it's been a busy 12 months. This governing body has made a lot of significant substantive decisions, and the Body of State Regulators was busy during that time and provided formal comments to this group on a lot of those issues. In the wake of that flurry of activity, we've recently been able to step back and focus more on the educational aspect, which is one of our charter principles, is to keep the BOSSR updated and educated on how the WEIM operates and relevant issues. So we have been focusing on that in recent meetings and in our upcoming meeting. We spent our last few meetings dedicating time to understanding some of the activities at the California ISO that we have not previously been involved in. We spent our May meeting walking through details of the Day Ahead Market Enhancement Initiative that you jointly approved last month. And at our June meeting,
Sure, sorry. I should have taken your suggestion to sit down, but I'll make it work. At our June meeting, we dedicated time to receiving an update on the California ISO Summer Readiness Plan, as well as the latest transmission activity that was underway. Neil Miller presented the 2022-23 transmission plan, which addressed the escalating need for new resources and set the foundation for a focused zonal approach to resource development. Allocating this time to transmission activities underway at the California ISO is somewhat novel for the BOSSR. With the regional nature of our body, we don't typically focus on BA-specific transmission planning activities, but it was a great opportunity to gain insight into the ways they are managing transmission activity within that particular BA footprint and to draw comparisons for other BAs that fall within the jurisdiction of individual members of the Body of State Regulators. We're also aware of the developments that are underway with respect to greenhouse gas accounting, coordination activity at the California ISO. We understand staff is in the informational gathering stage, specifically seeking to define the topics and the scope of the greenhouse gas working groups. We plan to dedicate our July meeting to this topic, and it will be held virtually on July 14th. And also the BOSSR is looking forward to the vote today on the nominating committee recommendations for governing body members. As you know, BOSSR Vice Chair Haley Williamson is on the nominating committee, and she's been doing a lot of heavy lifting representing the BOSSR. She's also been keeping us well informed of the progress. I want to personally acknowledge Vice Chair Gardner and all the work you did on this group, plus everything that you do just to advance good policy across the Western Interconnection, and we look forward to continued activities along those fronts. I also just want to state that the BOSSR members have expressed our unqualified support for the recommendations that are coming to you for the nominating committee on the vote you have later today. And then finally, I'm excited to share that we will be holding our annual Western Electricity Market Training Forum on August 17th and 18th in Portland, Oregon. This is a fantastic training for BOSSR members to help understand market fundamentals, and we work both with the California ISO and with Stanford University experts to provide this training. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair LeVar. Any questions from the governing body? I see none. Chair LeVar, I'll just say it's hard to believe. Oh, just a minute. Member Decker.
So I don't have a question so much, Commissioner, but I just want to thank you for the time that you gave to some of the governing body members yesterday, the time you and some of your colleagues, that we had a chance to sit down with you and do a little bit of outreach about what's going on, what are you guys thinking about? And so I just want to appreciate that time we had.
Thank you. It was very kind of those of you who are in town to come over to our offices and take that opportunity to speak with us. We appreciated it.
Thank you, Chair LeVar. It's hard to believe that this is actually summer with a activity you have proposed over the next 2 and 3 months. So thank you. Next on our agenda is agenda item 4, which is an update on the Regional Issues Forum. And we have the chair of the Regional Issues Forum, Josh Walter. And Josh is over here to my left.
Thank you. Yesterday, the RIF held its second meeting of the year, covering issues associated with gas deployment in the market and impacts on ongoing and upcoming electrification in the region. Speaking on behalf of the RIF sector liaisons, we all appreciate the attendance of the governing body members, as well as new Board of Governors member Joe Edo. Thank you for taking the time to be at the meeting and to hear the issues and remarks from those that were presenting. So I appreciate that. Overall, I believe it was a successful meeting. Attendance both in person and online was robust. So it was a great attendance, good subjects. Hope to keep that up over the course of the year in our upcoming meetings, as well as future years and future RIF meetings. Behind the scenes, the RIF is working on the structure and the timing behind the GRC's charge for creating a roundtable to discuss and help guide CAISO's policy catalog and roadmap. The RIF liaisons have been in communication with and have met with CAISO staff on this issue, and will continue to engage with CAISO on what may work best for both stakeholders as well as the market operator. The outcomes of these discussions will be socialized and communicated hopefully in the next coming weeks. It is at this point our main priority of determining and working through what this ultimately looks like. It's a great opportunity for the stakeholder community to have a greater voice or a greater impact on the catalog and the process and the priorities coming out of CAISO. So I really appreciate the time and the effort that CAISO staff have put into recognizing that the element of stakeholder input is wildly important in the development and the maturity of the EIM and eventually in EDM. We plan to hold at least one additional RIF meeting this year. Plans and content or subjects will also be forthcoming, but I don't have a specific timeline or schedule at this point. We like to include issues that are or maybe become more ripe for a governing body decision. And the front runner at this point is the topic of price formation. Depending on how the workshops go and timing for price formation, that very well could be a hot topic. Well, it is a hot topic, but it could become a hotter topic for the RIF to take up. And Chair LeVar's remarks also reminded me of the upcoming work on GHG work and the workshops associated with greenhouse gas. That also very well could be an additional RIF topic to be taken up in a future meeting sooner than later. So we'll see how that the workshops work out and the timing for our next RIF meeting. That covers my remarks for today. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the governing body? And there are none. So Josh, thank you for that briefing. I think that I'd like to comment on two things. One is we appreciate the invitation from the RIF for the governing body to attend. And I want to say thank you to CAISO Legal for working with us to find a way for the governing body members to be in attendance at the meeting. We've always been having to pull straws on who could attend, and by working and having a liaison and managing the ability to allow all the governing bodies to listen in directly is very helpful. And I think the gas panel certainly presented us with how broad and complex that issue is. And, there was obviously a clear no pathway, and that this is going to take a lot of work to move it forward. And the other part, and, we all understood electrification and what's coming. It was good to hear from the utilities on, what they're doing and what it means from their perspective. And then lastly, the update from Avangrid was really good. We had a very short one at our previous meeting that did not do justice to what they had gone through to go live. And so I think it was very informative and I think very helpful for possible other balancing authority only entities to possibly become participants in the WEIM. So Josh, thank you.
Thank you. And with that in mind, now that we know the rules of engagement for invitations to the governing body in our meetings, we will continue to honor the invitation and hope that we can continue to have a strong attendance in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is item 5. It's a briefing from CAISO staff on West-wide transmission activities, and Vice President Neil Miller is here to introduce the topic.
Thank you, Chair Kanzioka. So yes, we're really pleased today to be able to give an overview not only of some of the issues affecting the development of transmission within the California Balancing Authority area, but also how some of that planning is also impacting and also reaching beyond to have more of a west-wide influence as we explore collaborative opportunities with our neighbors, recognizing the scope of the challenges we have ahead of us. So with that, I'm pleased today to introduce Danielle Mills, our Principal of Infrastructure Policy Development at the ISO. Danielle only joined us a month and a half ago, but I think to her it probably feels like in ISO years, 7 or 8 months. But she hasn't run away from us yet, so we're pleased to have her on board and to walk us through a presentation today. So thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Neil. And good morning, governing body members. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here in the room at the governing body meeting with so many respected voices in the West. So thank you. I'm pleased to be here today to talk through some of our most recent work on west-wide transmission. We view this work to be really critical to reliability throughout the West, not just in California, but also an important way to ensure and improve regional diversity to make sure that we can achieve our decarbonization goals and transition more rapidly to clean energy. So go to the next slide, please. In the West, CAISO has no immediate ISO or RTO neighbors, and there's definitely been much discussion within this group and throughout the region about the fact that there are 39 different balancing authorities in the West. The Western EIM currently operates in 10 Western states and 1 province, and there are 42 different balancing areas and transmission operators that receive reliability coordinator services from RC West. So while much of the West is outside of this ISO and RTO structure, we're adding layers of coordination and organization to try to improve connectivity throughout the West. Next slide. Much discussion has gone into coordination between balancing areas, states, and markets. There's currently an interregional coordination framework between the ISO, Northern Grid, and West Connect, which has been approved by FERC for the purpose of interregional transmission planning. This framework encourages coordination in the form of regular exchanges of information, regular meetings, public meetings, and process alignment. And it also provides a framework for cost allocation in instances where projects provide regional benefits. This framework exists, but we and our neighbors haven't leveraged it to advance interregional projects that might provide shared benefits. The cost allocation provisions and some concerns around control of the outcome create additional challenges for meaningful engagement. And as such, there have been no regional transmission projects outside of the California ISO and no interregional projects approved in the West under this framework. Next slide. We should be thinking about projects that provide mutual or interregional benefits because connectivity in the West is important for reliability, resilience, affordability, and decarbonization. This connectivity can also support and strengthen regional markets such as the Western EIM and the Enhanced Day-Ahead Market. As these markets continue to evolve, we hope and assume that they will enhance opportunities for coordination across states and balancing areas, but markets alone will not solve the cost allocation questions or radically change resource planning or procurement opportunities from state to state or BA to BA. So while we don't expect EDAM to significantly shift states' views on their own resource development, it could provide additional opportunities for economic transmission refinements or refinements in transmission plans to capture economic benefits. Next slide. With the broader regional landscape in mind, CAISO has been looking for opportunities to access out-of-state resources, wind in particular. And in 2022, the ISO completed a 20-year transmission outlook, which identified such a profound need for these out-of-state resources that it identified needing the aggregate capacity of 5 major west-wide transmission lines, 4 of which will be located in 2 or more states, as well as additional HVDC transmission to Northern California and Southern California. So we are looking for opportunities to coordinate and collaborate with our neighbors. To put a finer point on it and zooming in closer to California, in May of this year, the ISO Board of Governors approved the 2022-2023 transmission plan. And in addition to identification of 45 different policy and reliability projects approved, the transmission plan identified significant need for interregional coordination. The projects that were approved within the transmission plan will enable the import of 4.5 gigawatts of new out-of-state wind generation from Idaho, Wyoming, and New Mexico by enhancing the corridors between the ISO border in southeastern Nevada and from western Arizona into California load centers. And the federal landscape is also evolving. So with heightened focus on the need for infrastructure development and transmission across the West and across the country, we are watching the federal landscape and expecting orders from FERC on now 2 transmission planning issues. One was just adopted since the time these slides were developed. And we've seen possible forthcoming orders on generator interconnection procedures and interregional planning as well. We've seen this issue emerge in other venues as well, such as the Joint Federal State Task Force on Electric Transmission, as well as a staff workshop on interregional transmission transfer capability. Next slide. And the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has also spurred new opportunities and attention to transmission, with DOE recently releasing a framework for national interest electric transmission corridors, which will designate these corridors and may be a venue for discussion of some good Western transmission projects with mutual benefits for the entities involved that could be considered as these types of corridors. And this is particularly a great opportunity to access federal funding, and that can go toward reducing ratepayer impacts. And just this week, we also heard that 8 states in the Northeast asked DOE to establish a collaborative on interregional planning. Their justification reads very similar to the issues that we're exploring in California as well. So in that instance, I believe ISO New England, the New York ISO, and PJM could be invited as technical experts or to provide technical support as well. And then just to close with a few observations and facilitate some discussion, hopefully around improved coordination throughout the West. Effective dialogue is critical. Forums like this provide opportunities to enhance that discussion in search of creative new solutions, and working together in the market development process is also building trust across the region. Interregional planning needs to be coordinated with resource planning. We can't wait until resources are developed and then look for these opportunities. We assume that resource planning will continue to be a state or utility driven, but that should not preclude opportunities to coordinate before the development occurs and strengthen regional or interregional connections between resource planning and transmission planning. We need tighter linkages between procurement processes and interconnection and planning processes for regional and interregional transmission. This is something that we are in the process of reforming in California, and it may serve as a useful model for more regional and interregional discussions as well. The cost allocation discussions for ratepayer recovered transmission facilities are a challenge under FERC Order 1000. In light of these challenges around Order 1000, we are pursuing bilateral discussions and relying on, to some extent, on FERC's negotiated agreement policy statement. And we want to explore further options. How can we leverage the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act to reduce the delivered cost of electricity to ratepayers? And given the multiple proceedings and venues for these discussions, we can be creative and flexible. This moment presents us not only an opportunity, but also a responsibility to refresh our processes, leverage new opportunities, and consider some blue sky solutions to address the need for new transmission in the West and across the country. Thank you.
Danielle, thank you. You covered a lot of territory, and we could probably have long discussions on any one of your slides and material. But let me ask the governing body members if they have any questions of you. So, John Prescott.
Danielle, thank you for being here for that presentation. And Rob's right, we could spend all day, going into details, but just a couple of things occurred to me, and this would be under the lens of the imbalance market. And you talked about the coordination of the three entities. I think it was Northern Grid, West Connect, and the ISO getting together to coordinate transmission planning. So tell me just a little bit more about what is that coordination? What does it look like? And how might that impact what we do in the imbalance market?
So I'd be happy to help provide some background on that. That there are really two things going on in terms of the current interregional coordination through the FERC Order 1000 process. One is the established tariff-driven coordination sequencing of meetings that occurs that are jointly held by ourselves as well as representatives from West Connect and Northern Grid. There's the annual sharing of information of the base cases and the planning models that are used by each entity in developing their own transmission plans. There's also a vetting process for which projects that have been submitted by proponents that could qualify as potential interregional projects. And as Danielle mentioned, that process to this point has not triggered any of those proposals being designated as potential interregional transmission projects and getting more thorough analysis. So that's the formal process coordinated with our neighboring planning entities, but as well recognizing that the utilities that are members of those organizations are also NERC registered transmission planning entities. We also conduct direct discussions either with individual planning utilities or groups of them that are occurring more or less offline to explore potential opportunities that could be elevated into the formal process. So those are the discussions that are, Danielle indicated, are also to some extent taking advantage of the FERC policy statement on the ability to negotiate bilateral arrangements that would be perhaps outside of the FERC Order 1000 formal process. So we're having those discussions. We're being transparent that those discussions are taking place. And probably the best example is in this year's transmission plan. We had communicated that we were working directly with Idaho Power on a potential joint project of the SWIP North transmission project. So those are the two different venues right now, as well as I'll say other more informational study processes.
Can I just add to it? Because I think your second part of the question was critical, is the how does this play into and provide value to the Western energy balance market? And transmission is the essential arteries that allow for those benefits, those growing benefits to accrue. And so while the WEIM doesn't in of itself drive transmission upgrades, it does, one, provide indication where transmission may get constrained and where you may want to open up the highway a bit more. But to the second point is it is that way of getting those benefits. And without those transmission, we would not have a WEIM and the benefits that we're accruing. So in a way, they do converge. They are kind of separate processes, but they do significant interplay in terms of leveraging the transmission to grow those benefits. And if I could, since I have the mic, I do want to acknowledge yesterday was a fairly significant event. Also, it was the groundbreaking ceremony for the Trans-West Express, a significant new transmission DC line. And part of, I wouldn't say, obviously there's a lot that went into that, but part of that was our creative way of thinking about the subscriber PTO model to allow for that to be a participating transmission, but also allow for subscribers to effectively pay for that transmission itself. So a lot of interaction. We look forward to that and other transmission that's potentially going to develop over the West.
Okay, thanks for that. Good response. And my takeaway is really that the efforts and coordination can only enhance the market opportunities, I guess is what I'm hearing. So, I appreciate that, but it's always worth us keeping an eye on to see what's going on out there for that reason. Thank you.
So,
John, anything else? Okay, Anita?
so just maybe quickly, Daniel, since this is your first time before us and you barely have hit the ground run, or you've hit the ground running, but you've barely been here. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Yeah, and apologies for deferring so quickly to Neil, but I think he has more experience in the interregional planning landscape than I do at this point. So my background is I've worked within the development community for the past several years, most recently with Pattern Energy, doing political and regulatory affairs. And then prior to that, I was with American Clean Power, doing all the California policy for them. I have a background in public administration and environmental science and environmental policy, and have been very focused on West-wide renewable and transmission issues for the last 10 or 15 years, but most recently and most focused on California.
Need anything else? Member Gardner.
Wonderful. Thank you. Danielle, welcome to the ISO. It's really nice to see you again in your new role and really appreciated your presentation and your remarks this morning. I also appreciated the question from Member Prescott about tying in the view that the ISO has regarding regional transmission planning and the need for this out-of-state transmission access and kind of bringing that, making that relevant for the conversations we're having as an EIM governing body, and why, as Mark noted, why this additional transmission capacity is so important to have well-functioning markets in the West, including the EIM. So really appreciated all those remarks. Tagging on to a point that Mark also raised, which was the subscriber PTO model and how that's being applied to Trans-West Express, which really is, from what I can tell, a fairly novel approach, and really incredible that that's been helpful in bringing that line to fruition. I'm curious, you had a slide, Danielle, where you were listing some of those critical regional lines that CAISO is looking at. I'm curious, and perhaps you can't speak to this yet, but if there are any other conversations happening between the ISO and other merchant developers to potentially apply that subscriber PTO model to additional lines in the West.
Yeah, I think there are conversations about how to apply this. And I think in the development of the subscriber PTO model, which is in its final stages now with the ISO, we've been really careful to try to use the Trans-West Express case and model as sort of a platform for developing a framework, but also retaining some flexibility within the framework so that it can be applied to other projects that may be slightly different in terms of, footprint or construction timelines or things like that. So the model right now, while based on Trans-West, is intended to apply to a broader set of interregional projects or west-wide transmission projects. Yes.
Thank you.
And Member Campbell.
Yep. Thanks, Chair Kanzioka and Danielle. Thank you for the presentation. Welcome. I'm going to stick to this on this bilateral theme. So certainly see the long-term, value and critical need for kind of these coordinated structures and coordinated planning. But it's apparent that the bilateral approach is kind of an opportunity that's here. What if you could speak more to like, what are the sort of like, how far can that take the region, sort of this bilateral approach? And also just curious, like, why is it now this emerging? I mean, why not 10 years ago? But yeah, just kind of interested to hear, like, are there limits to how far the region can get with these sort of bilateral projects? Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this is sort of, from what I understand, what we're doing in the absence of another workable framework. The cost allocation questions are real, and from my understanding, not well addressed or not conducive to getting toward an agreement or getting toward an actual approval of an interregional project under FERC Order 1000. So in the absence of that, we've turned to bilateral agreements, but those don't necessarily provide a framework that can be applied more broadly for cost allocation either. So this is why, we came up with the subscriber PTO model, which is one way of thinking through cost allocation. But it also doesn't entirely recognize that there may be lines that have more of a shared benefit between California and another region, or the ISO and another region. And so having more opportunities to talk through how to not only share those benefits, but share those costs, I think would be welcome beyond just the bilateral. Do you want to add anything?
Andy, anything else? So Danielle, thank you. Neil, thank you. I have a question which follows along the theme that's already been asked. Now, the material is covered over multiple slides. So when we take a look at the interregional projects, clearly CAISO has looked at it from the value it brings to California and CAISO, and appropriately so justifying it that way, especially if you're going to invest. In the process of looking at these interregional projects, they clearly bring other benefits. Some tie other regions together, and some provide enhanced interregional bidirectional capability. And lastly, as it was touched on it also improves some of the grid resiliency. Is any of that being looked at in the evaluation process, not necessarily in the cost justification from CAISO, but for the evaluation of supporting any of these projects?
It's Neil here. I'll take a first shot at that because I've been more involved in those analyses. That our analysis does tend to look at, it does rely on West-wide modeling. So we do see some of the benefits to other parties that those projects would provide. In general, though, and one of the reasons I think the FERC Order 1000 interregional process hasn't been more successful was that in general, there's not always a consistent approach in other entities looking at how their own resource needs are going to evolve and including those future resource needs in their planning models. So we, to some extent, see some of the benefits that are associated with, I'll say, the current resource fleet outside of California, but really don't get into the potential benefits those projects could provide in meeting their future resource development requirements. And that's quite a barrier to showing the full benefit. So that, like you said, that's where the FERC Order 1000 process with its cost allocation provisions created, I'd say, some reluctance for people to fully engage in that work. And as a result, our benefit analysis shows some, but not the full depth of the benefits across the West.
So to follow up, and a little bit of a theme, but it's just asked a little bit differently. So in the evaluation, it doesn't help enhance the market and improves those opportunities. Is there a way that part of the evaluation is included or can be included to help justify the projects in the funding?
Well, I think that's where we're seeing that to get parties to the table in a forum where they're more comfortable fully exploring those benefits.
Okay.
That's what led us, as Danielle said, to working on more of a bilateral arrangement with the reluctance around fully engaging in what FERC Order 1000 envisioned for an interregional process.
So I hate to beat up on Order 1000, and so I'll kind of keep my comments as contained as possible.
I don't mind.
I know, but what about, Neil, that same thought process, but outside of Order 1000? So,
well, like I said, we've been approaching this right now through more of a bilateral approach. As Danielle said, though, that is that's a way to address or to work around the fact that there isn't a better coordination process that more fully explores all the benefits in place. So it's not the best solution, but it's the solution we have at present. So, you know, at the same time, we're also looking at supporting other developments, including the DOE's broader benefit studies, Western Interstate Energy Board is also looking at possible coordination frameworks, and we'd be interested in participating in those as well. We're not saying that the bilateral approach is the best solution. We actually don't think it is, but it's the one that we're able to move on today, so that's why we're exploring it.
thank you. I think this has been excellent information and presentation, and I think quite thought-provoking. Let me move to public comment. And so I'm going to look in the room if there's anyone in the.
So I was just thinking about the comments and summary and thinking about TWE. So TWE took 10 years, 11 years to get to groundbreaking. So when you look at these projects and you think about what we need and when we need it, and any one of these, you think, if we're talking another 10 years, even with federal support and federal help, and TWE had a lot of federal support and help along the way. It's a little discouraging about, yeah, we have these plans, but can they get built?
I think there are two things we need to look at when we talk about some of these timelines. The permitting timeline across the West and actually across the United States, the time it takes to get transmission permitted and built. Once there's a clear signal that we're pulling the trigger and wanting to move on the project, those timelines are clearly too long. We've been asked to explore frameworks in our planning process where we would improve projects identified as needed 15 years out just because the permitting timeline could take so long. But the amount of additional uncertainty and risk that takes in committing to projects 15 years ahead of when you think you need it clearly indicates that that's a poor solution, that what we need to do is streamline the actual permitting and development process so that when the decision is made that these are projects we need, that we can get them developed more quickly. Totally agree with that. The flip side, though, is that some of the timelines people quote are the timelines individual developers have spent developing their projects. And it's great that we have a number of these projects, I'll say more shovel ready, where a lot of the permitting work has been done. But at the same time, up until recently, Transwest didn't have a paying customer who was willing to support the development of the project as well. So that's the other timeline we have to consider is when was someone, whether a planning region or load serving entities signing PPAs, when is someone actually willing to commit to that project and start moving forward on it? So we do need to take that into account too. We've had projects that have been in development for many years, but do not have a sponsor willing to actually fund the project at the end of the day.
And if I could just add to, I think right now there's sort of an absence of the connection, or there's an absence in the ability to do joint resource planning. And so, we in California have had tighter linkages now between how we're planning resources and what the long-term need is going to be to make sure that those resources are going to be available when we're ready for them or when we need them. That hasn't necessarily spread throughout the West or throughout the regions. And not only is that something that maybe other entities might want to consider adopting, I think there's integrated resource planning and things like that, but we're not doing it together. And so that makes that makes the planning of these long lead time resources more challenging. So more coordination upfront on the resource planning will help us identify projects that we're going to need to show up in 5 or 10 years and get them ready so that they can start the process now.
Thank you. I was just going to note that we heard yesterday in the RIF meeting about some utilities transitioning to integrated system planning, which is what you just touched on, and it would be interesting to see that done on a broader basis as well. So thank you. Now, I'm going to go back to public comment now. Is anyone in the room interested in making a public comment? Okay, seeing none. Candace, can we check online to see if anybody wants to make a public comment?
If you'd like to join the queue, please click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen. If you have joined us by phone only, please dial #2 on your telephone keypad. We have no hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. That'll allow us to move on to agenda item 6. I'm going to reintroduce Melanie Fry, President and CEO of WEC, and she'll be addressing WEC key priorities. And Melanie, we are really pleased that you can join us and share your perspectives from WEC and the WEC board on what are the key things that are driving what's going on here in the Western Interconnection.
Great. Thank you, Chair Kanzioka. I really appreciate the opportunity to not only host your meeting here in our offices, but also get a few minutes on your agenda. So thank you for that invitation. I think I'll start at a high level and talk broadly about the risks that WEC is paying attention to and where we've really tried to focus in our efforts. And then building on the theme from the last presentation, I'll talk about the work WEC has underway related to transmission and trying to fill some gaps maybe that have existed there. So I think it's clear the context in which this industry is trying to keep the lights on is under massive transformation. There's probably not a part of it that's not changing, whether it's the resources that are generating the power, the way we're delivering it to our customers, the technologies that are there, the threat environment as it relates to weather, both cold and heat, widespread events that affect a much greater geography and have sort of changed the way the Western Interconnection is able to deliver power. It was designed to be able to take advantage of the geographic diversity, and no longer is that really something we can rely on. So we're in the midst of this once-in-a-lifetime transformation of the grid, and as you were all just talking about, the urgency is now. There isn't time to delay in considering what are the resources and how are we going to get them to the load. It's threatening the reliability, the security, and increasingly part of the conversation is the resilience. And that's what WEC's assessments have increasingly shown over the last few years. We've shared our Western assessment of resource adequacy, and that has highlighted that we're getting closer to the edge of not having enough resources. And what we've identified through our work with stakeholders is something that Danielle and Neil were raising, and that is we need to think about it integrated. We can't think of resources in one silo and transmission in another silo. We really do need to move toward the more integrated planning. So to that end, I'll just highlight a couple of the priority areas. We go through a biennial process with our stakeholders and board to identify what are the uniquely Western focus areas that we need to work with our stakeholders on. This then focuses the work of not only our staff and the independent work we do, but also our technical committees that are populated through the utilities in the West, the resource planning organizations, and other stakeholders. I'll highlight and thank the Cal ISO for allowing Didi Subaki to be the co-chair of our Reliability Risk Committee. That's a newly formed committee about a year ago that emerged in its current form. And he's provided great leadership to raising the conversation and honing in on the reliability risks. The 4 focus areas, so I'll highlight them and then I'm going to hone in on one of them specifically. So one is understanding the impact of extreme natural events. This includes the things like wildfires, the heat, the cold, all of the threats that we're increasingly seeing have impact to the resources. The second is resource adequacy, and tightly connected to that is transmission adequacy. And also I'll save that one for the end. The third is just assessing the impacts of the changing resources and customer loads. As we look to electrify the economy, whether it's transportation or building, heating, it's going to make massive changes on how the customer loads impact reliability. And then the final one, and I think it underpins everything that we do and is something that we all need to focus on, and that's cybersecurity and physical security. You really can't have a conversation about reliability, security, and resilience without considering just that ever-present threat and the increasing threat. I'll point you to the WEC State of the Interconnection report that was released just a couple of months ago, and it highlights a few of the key cybersecurity and physical security threats. So those are the priority areas, but I'd like to focus in on how that guides our work, especially related to transmission and the work that we do. As you know, we don't have an authority role to direct construction or new resources or location of resources. We don't play a role in siting. We don't play a role in permitting. But we view our work as shining a light on the risks to reliability. And so we're using that mindset as we undertake a new transmission study. We developed this over the course of about 12 months through a wide stakeholder process. And our goal, the way we framed the question initially, is why hasn't there been transmission built in the last 10 years? We know we have Order 1000 and we know we have regional planning groups that have that responsibility. And as Danielle's presentation highlighted, there hasn't been transmission built. So what's missing? What's part of the gap? And this resulted in a long list of things from the siting and the permitting and the cost allocation. But it started the conversation with our board and with our stakeholders. And then we worked to identify where could WEC uniquely contribute within our role and authority. Some of the things on the 7 were clearly outside our authority. We're not going to get in project development or approving which projects need to be built. So our conclusion was to focus on 2 specific areas. One is to enhance WEC's modeling capabilities with an emphasis on the 20-year time horizon and scenario development. And the second is to develop a Western assessment of transmission trends. So I'll talk about the second one first. The second one, this transmission trends, it's really a bad name. We should have come up with something else. That said, what we're looking for is forward-looking. So we're going to undertake with our technical committees 4 studies in the 20-year or the year 20 time horizon. One is a long duration energy storage with an extended extreme weather event, a hot and cold extreme event, those 2 separate, and then the impacts of compound changes in load and electrification. So we're going to do these year 20 studies using our existing 20-year data set. And then we're going to identify the trend of common congestion across all 4 of those studies, with the thought that this will then identify where are those hotspots where transmission is likely needed. And that will help, at least our view is, inform the conversation from regulators, policymakers, and transmission, those with the responsibility for transmission. We expect that work will be complete by the end of this year. So we're knee deep in doing the studies and running the scenarios. And then we will, we're endeavoring to release this first trends assessment at the end of this year. We see it as an iterative process. This is something new that we haven't done before. And much like our Western assessment of resource adequacy, we think it will mature over the next several years. But we feel the urgency in order to get some information out there, leveraging the independent perspective and the interconnection-wide view that WEC has. So I'll talk about the first part of it as well, and that is the enhancing of WEC's modeling capabilities. We have our technical committees and our staff working very closely to try and develop the process by which these models will be developed. And, you know, for me, I think about that and say, good, let's get that done. We should have it done in a few weeks, right? The team is telling me that that really will take about 12 to 18 months to develop the robust process and to work with industry and all of the stakeholders. Because at WEC, we don't develop the data. We collect the data from all of the balancing authorities, transmission planners, load serving entities. So we've got to develop all of those processes, and it really does need to be a collaborative stakeholder process. So I'm trying to be patient, as are the rest of us, all the while we're trying to help the conversation push forward. The second piece I'd like to mention, and this is something that's very new and we don't have a lot of details sorted out, and that is the legislation, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that resolved the debt ceiling crisis in Congress, directed NERC, so we're part of NERC in what we call the ERO enterprise. It directed NERC to conduct a study on the reliable transfer of electric power between neighboring transmission planning areas. There are three parts of it. First part is to assess the current interregional transfer capability between planning regions. The second is to then make recommendations on prudent additions that would be for the benefit of reliability between adjacent areas. And then the third piece is to make recommendations on how we maintain and sustain the recommendations from items 1 and 2. This is going to be a heavy lift. This is the first time any of us are aware that Congress has directed NERC to do something. Our obligation is within 18 months that NERC will submit this report to FERC, and then FERC will submit that for public comment. And 12 months later, we'll provide a report to Congress. So I think what it highlights is, you know, the first step in resolving any problem is awareness. I think there's broad awareness that there's a problem with transmission. And, you know, as Danielle pointed out, FERC's involved, DOE's involved, and now we have legislation that's trying to elevate the conversation. We're now working with NERC to try and determine what the scope of this study will be and what's required. Much like all studies that NERC issues, later today they'll be issuing the State of Reliability Report. All of the analytics and the modeling is done at the regional entities. So WEC will be doing the modeling and the data analysis for the Western interconnection in this interregional transfer capability. We envision this will be much like all of our work, that will have a stakeholder process, that will have some voice, but at the end of the day, it will be, it's expected to be that independent view of the situation. So new territory, lots of work underway. You know, we're taking the first 2 months to do the planning pieces of it. We need to make sure we have a plan before we just launch out and do studies, recognizing how different the Western interconnection is from the Eastern interconnection and Texas. So lots more to come on that, but I just wanted to raise that for your awareness. So I'll just close by saying, you know, I think reliability is a team sport, and it's taking the best and brightest from across all aspects of the industry. We see WEC as filling an important role as the independent interconnection-wide view. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to share that view with you here today. And to the extent you have time, I'm happy to talk more about any of these things or any of our other things we have underway here at WEC. So thank you, Chair Kanzioka.
Melanie, thank you so much. A lot to think about again. And again, very thought-provoking. But let me first turn to the governing body members for questions. Member Campbell.
Thank you, Chair Kanzioka, and thank you, Melanie, for the presentation. It's very helpful to hear the framing of how you've kind of gone through looking for what the needs are and kind of where WEC has particular expertise and is prioritizing. So question about kind of you described the modeling kind of enhancements as well as the transmission analysis. When you do that sort of, with that work, who do you think of as the audiences for the results? And how do you kind of get input from engagement from those audiences to kind of ensure that what you're producing can be used in, whether it's regulatory proceedings or planning processes, things like that?
So that's it's a great question. Thank you for that question. We see our audience as very broad. And this has been a big transformation for WEC over the last 5 years. Is historically WEC has been very entrenched in the technical subject matter expert, the people who are doing the modeling, and we produced reports that were focused for them. We're now trying to build into that, knowing that, really the general population is an audience and a key stakeholder for us. But, importantly, state policymakers, regulators, others who are not entrenched in the details. So we try and take a two-pronged approach and meet both the needs of both. Having the technical detail and the transparency, which has been a hallmark of what we do here, but also synthesizing that down to the plain English version of what do we see as the problem. So we see our audiences as both. I will say we're still growing and working to build the skill set internally to deliver for the latter, the policy audience. That is an art, and we do find ourselves at times getting a little too much into the weeds. So bear with us and please provide feedback along the way if you see something that's just not hitting that mark. But that's aspirationally, we want to be able to serve the needs of those two varied audiences.
Thank you.
Member Gardner.
Thank you. This will be more of a comment than a question. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. But Melanie, I want to thank you for speaking with us today and providing us with that update. All of that is just really encouraging. And I really want to just acknowledge the role that WEC plays in the region in terms of doing all of these analyses that I believe provide so much value to decision makers and policymakers alike. So first, I just want to acknowledge the Western Assessment of Transmission Trends. You said that it wasn't a great name, but I'm going to disagree with you because you can turn it into a wonderful acronym. It can be WAT, which in a world of acronyms, I think that's fabulous. So I just wanted to share that with you. Joe and I were talking about acronyms last night and just coming up with, we had a lot of good ones that we were sharing. So anyway, acronyms were on my mind. But to be more serious, I wanted to also acknowledge, this report, I think will be just as important as the resource adequacy reports that you have been working on. And the fact that you view this as iterative is really wonderful to hear. The fact that you'll continue doing these analyses, I think it will be really important to the region. And then a specific thing I wanted to acknowledge was that, if I recall correctly, when you were doing the surveys of stakeholders before you came up with the idea for the transmission trends assessment, this is really in reaction to the NOPR that we got from FERC last summer on the need for long-term transmission planning. And there was a lot of emphasis on 20-year data sets and 20-year scenario analysis. And the fact that WEC is moving forward with that kind of forward-looking analysis without seeing any type of final rule yet, I just want to commend WEC for being so forward-looking there. And again, just want to underscore the value that I think this kind of analysis will provide for the region. So thanks again, Melanie.
Thank you for that.
And Member Decker.
Melanie, thank you for being here. And I too want to just echo many of Jennifer's comments in regard to how valuable WEC and your staff and the presentations. And I really liked what you said about making things that are very technical, easy for the layperson to understand. I think you guys have accomplished that. But I was thinking about the report to NERC that goes to Congress. And do you happen to know, is this a we want to know kind of report, or do you have a perspective that they're actually going to do anything once they know?
I think that's a good question. We've sort of made the presumption that they want to take action, by asking the question. We have no way really of knowing, the things behind the scenes that are at play. But I think given that, I think it's interesting, given that there are so many other players, you know, FERC and DOE that could have been assigned this study. I think it's indicative of a desire for that perceived independent view, and that's what NERC provides. So we're going with the presumption that there will be something that comes out of this, but nothing, we have no inside intel that would suggest what that might look like.
And Member Prescott.
Yeah, Melanie, I just wanted to add my thanks for those comments. It must have been difficult to take all that you do and all the WEC does and distill it down into 10 or 15 minutes for us, but I got a lot of notes here, so thanks for that. And then finally, just again, thank you for this meeting facility for the last 2 days. It's just an awesome place, and your staff helping as well, so thanks.
My pleasure, thank you.
No, I do have a question, but I want to echo the comments by all of the other governing body members on our sincere appreciation for you being here and for staff support, the offices. It's been very helpful for us, and I think it's made for a great meeting. When you mentioned the issue of having to address the interregional transfer, do you know is when that description is being used, is that interregional within the WEC footprint? So in other words, California to the desert southwest to the Intermountain region, or is this WEC to ERCOT, WEC to SPP, WEC to MISO, or do you, I mean, because that's a huge difference. And then the where the investment in transmission goes, it would be, tremendously weighted and possibly improperly so on that determination.
Yeah, it's an open question. The legislation is unclear what was meant by, adjacent regions. Our early plans is we're going to use the FERC Order 1000 regions as the adjacent regions. So I think the focus, clearly for us here in the West will be the Western interconnection and between the 3 regional planning group regions. How it plays out as it relates to connectivity between the Eastern interconnection and the Western interconnection or Texas, that's more of a, once we can walk, we'll run, and we'll figure that part out. So yet to be identified there.
Thank you. Excellent. And yeah, I think we all understand some implications on how it impacts the market and where that would add most value. At this point, now, if you don't mind, I'm going to open it to public comment. So anyone in the room wishing to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none. Candice, can we check to see if anyone online wants to make a public comment?
Absolutely. Once again, if you've joined us by phone only, please press #2 on your phone. For everyone else, please click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen to join the queue. I have no hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. Melanie, thank you so much. If it is okay, I'm going to ask if there's any objections by the governing body or by Mr. Shetler if we take a 10-minute break. Want to make sure you'll stay. I don't want you leaving. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. So 10:35. So welcome back, everyone. Our next agenda item is agenda item 7. And that is the decision on the governing body nominations. And I am going to turn this over to CAISO Vice President Stacy Crowley for this subject.
Thank you, Chair Conziolka, and good morning, everyone. I am delighted to introduce Jim Shetler with Bank. He is a member of the WEIM nominating committee, and he's here on behalf of the committee and substituting for Nicole Hughes, who wasn't able to be here. But thank you so much, Jim, for being here. And thanks to the nominating committee for all their work over the past several months. It is an annual effort, as Chair Conziolka noted, and you all do a great job and roll up your sleeves and really try to get to the best result by that July 1st timeframe as you can. So much appreciated, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stacy. I appreciate the introduction. Chairman Kazuoka, member of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I will refrain from doing a lot of introductions. I think most people know who I am and what I do for a living. But I am pleased to be here to represent the nominating committee. And this year I am the EIM entity representative to the committee, and was asked by Nicole if I would help co-chair the effort. I didn't realize that meant I got volunteered to be here, but something about a trip to Spain took priority for her, and I can't argue with that. So we do have a presentation. I was tempted to just say, could we go to the last page? But no, okay, we will go through the presentation. Next slide, please. So as noted here, Anita Decker's term was ending, or ends in end of June. And we were responsible for looking for filling that position. Anita was nice enough to say she was interested in running again, which the nominating committee appreciated. However, we didn't let her off completely light. We did do a lot of review of her performance and gave her an opportunity to interview with us. And based on the interview, looking at her performance as a governing body member and surveying the sectors and the stakeholders, we came to a unanimous decision that we believe she should be reappointed. So looking at the members, I won't go through all the names up there. Those are the members that are on the nominating committee. I did want to note that we do appreciate the participation from both the governing body and the Board of Governors on the nominating committee. They are non-voting members, but they're not shy about expressing their opinions and providing feedback. And I think that was valuable in our discussion. So we do appreciate that. Next slide, please. Yes, I do have 2 hours set aside for walking through this. Let's go ahead and put everything up there. Yeah. All I want to do is just say that we did walk through the process and the ISO legal made sure that we did. And so I think they will say that we met the requirements for filling the position. And next slide, please. So I noted where we're at, Member Decker, and we thought our job was done and it would be a light load for the nominating committee, and we were starting our plans for summer vacations when somebody threw a curveball at us, and Member Gardner let us know that she would be planning on resigning at the end of June. So that did kick off a more formal process. We did bring in an executive search firm. We also surveyed our stakeholders to look at potential nominees for the position. We did end up with a long list that we surveyed with our members that we discussed as a body, whittled that down to a short list, and then finally a list of candidates for interviews. Based on the interviews that we conducted and the survey of our stakeholder members, we are pleased to announce that we are recommending Rebecca Wagner to fill that position. And so, in summary, it is the consensus recommendation of the nominating committee that the governing body consider reappointing Anita Decker to a full term and appoint Rebecca Wagner for the 1 year remaining in the term that Jennifer is leaving. And I think I'll stop there, see if there's any questions. I do have a couple of closing comments, but I'll stop there.
Jim, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from the governing body members? Member Campbell.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to make a comment sort of speaking to the strength of the process, having had the opportunity to sort of be on the inside. So a year ago, I went through the process as a candidate, and then this year had the opportunity to experience it from the other side of the table. And one, I just wanted to emphasize that it really is the case, the nominating process. It has some bureaucracy. There's a lot of boxes up there on the chart, but really is an important foundation of the independence of the EIM, of the governing body independence. It's a stakeholder-driven process. It ensures that each of us who ends up on the body are very aligned with the interests of the market as a whole. We're not kind of coming from a particular sector or anything like that. We go through this vetted through a process that's very cross-sectoral, you could say. And that's really a key foundation. I also wanted to thank the members of the nominating committee for their efforts on this, for the calls they did with the group as a whole, as well as all the efforts they did getting input from their individual constituents. And thank you, Jim, for your service as vice chair. Thanks to Nicole Hughes of Renewable Northwest for her service as chair. This was a very strong process for stakeholder engagement. The PIO group is now a voting member of this group pursuant to recommendations that came through the governance review committee. So they were another strong participant in the process. I also wanted to recognize Greg Fisher, who does a parallel review on conflicts of interest, spending a lot of time talking to individual candidates about sometimes difficult conversations about sort of conflicts, both real conflicts as well as even the appearance of conflicts. That's a very, very important behind the scenes part of the process, vetting process that kind of gives us the nominating committee a list of real candidates, and then and sort of confidence to the market as a whole that the governing body is free of conflict. So I just want to recognize that and really emphasize the importance of this process to the effectiveness of our governance. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, let me just conclude with little add on to what Member Campbell said. The governing body is blind to the process, and we greatly appreciate what the nominating committee does. We know it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of review, and the nominating committee has just done an outstanding job of doing this vetting process and coming back with really high caliber individuals, and looking at the overall balance of the governing body and having, trying to find that right diversification. So greatly appreciated on the work that you and the rest of the members do.
Thank you. And Member Campbell, I appreciate the comments you made. I think the nominating committee does take its job very seriously. And I agree with you. I think it is the foundational part of making sure we have an independent governing body that's overseeing the market. So we appreciate that. If you don't mind, maybe I'll have a couple of closing comments, and then I'll turn it over to you to decide whether you agree with the nominating committee or not. First of all, I wanted to thank the ISO, particularly Holly Taylor and the legal group, for your support. It was instrumental in our ability to make this process flow, so we appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to note is we will be doing a nominating committee debrief here. We're trying to get that scheduled. I think we always can look for improvements in the process and what we can do to make it flow better. So we are looking at doing that, and we'll certainly provide feedback if we find out anything that we think warrants some changes. And then lastly, I guess I just wanted to comment, Member Prescott and Kanzioka, as I sit here in this room, it brings back memories of other meetings that we've had here. And generally, I like to say fond memories, generally. But I appreciate the ability to be here, to join you today, and I'll look forward to your decision based on our recommendations.
Jim, thank you so much. Before we move on, let me move on to public comment. And so first, are there any public comments in the room? No. Oh. Matt LaCar is wishing to make a public comment. Matt, if you could just repeat your name and affiliation.
Yeah, I'm Matt LaCar with Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and I just wanted to second the recommendation of Rebecca Wagner. Rebecca, as all of you know, was on the governance review committee for 2 years plus, and stepped in after the tragic passing of Therese Hampton to a leadership role. She is a fantastic individual, a fantastic collaborator and coordinator who is well known to the community and has the full support of certainly our stakeholder sector. So I just wanted to, on behalf of not only PG&E, but also I'll take the liberty of saying my director, Eric Eisenman, as a GRC member, on behalf of the GRC, give a full-throated vote of support for Rebecca's nomination.
Matt, thank you for those remarks. Seeing as there are no others in the room, Candice, can we check and see if anyone who is online wishes to make a public comment?
Yes, if you'd like to make a comment, please click the raise hand icon or press #2 on your phone if you've joined us by phone only. There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. So we can move forward now with a nomination. And I'll turn to Greg Fisher on this.
Thanks, Chair Conzioka. So based on the discussion, I think a proposed motion is appropriate at this time, if you'll agree.
Yes.
All right, so I'll read the motion, then we'll have it moved and take a vote. So moved that the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body reappoints Anita Decker for a term beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2026, and appoints Rebecca Wagner for a term beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024 as members of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. Ask for a motion at this time.
So moved.
And a second.
Gardner and Prescott. And now we ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All in favor? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Oh, yeah, excellent. I'm not certain if anybody else in the governing body wants to make a remark. John?
Yeah, I do. Just a congratulations. I assume that Rebecca is listening, so welcome aboard and really want to credit Anita for all the work she's done. So I'm glad she's signed on for another 3 years. So congratulations to both of you.
Anybody else want to? Jennifer, please.
I just want to acknowledge, I've personally worked with Rebecca Wagner since I joined the industry. I think it was about 12 years ago when I was working at the Western Interstate Energy Board for Doug Larson, who I know many people in this room know. And Rebecca was one of the first commissioners that I got to know pretty well when she was on the Nevada Commission. Rebecca is just an outstanding human being, a wonderful advocate, sort of an eternal diplomat, and knows these issues inside and out. And I think will be a true advocate for the energy imbalance market and any future markets that we see. So I am just thrilled that she is going to be the next member. I also just want to take a minute to say thank you for the time that I was allowed to serve on the governing body. I probably should have said this earlier when we had the resolution, but I didn't get a chance to jump in. So I want to thank my fellow members for making this job one of the most enjoyable ones I've ever had. I want to thank CAISO management and staff for just always providing such outstanding support and expertise to this governing body. And of course, I want to thank all the stakeholders for being so engaged, especially during a crazy year of stakeholder processes. It's been a wonderful time, and I want to thank all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'll conclude with Jim, that I think all the governing body members know Rebecca Wagner, and I, like John, I hope she is listening in. And as we look at your recommendation on behalf of the nominating committee and what we were voting on, if you're familiar with the Capital One commercial, one of the easiest decisions to make. It's clear. So thank you. So with that, Rebecca, welcome, and we'll be seeing you here shortly. July 1 rolls around quickly. So our next agenda item is agenda item 8, which is the election of the new chair and vice chair for the next 12 months. And I'll turn this over to Greg Fisher.
Thanks, Chair Conzioka. So as we all know, it's an annual process for the governing body to elect a chair and a vice chair. And given the circumstance this year that our vice chair is leaving the governing body, it would normally be the situation where the chair would assume the vice chair would assume the chair position. Since that's not going to happen, we have 2 nominations that we need today, and one for the chair and one for the vice chair. And so what I'll do is I'll turn it back to you, Chair Conzioka, for any suggested nominations.
Thank you. So I'll ask the governing body if they would like to have any discussion or make any recommendations. John?
So I do have recommendations. I don't know if you want any discussion first, but I'm ready to jump right in with a recommendation.
I will check and see if anyone wants to cut you off. And no one wants to cut you off. We'll move forward.
Okay, well then I recommend that we have Andy Campbell as chair and Rob Konziolka as vice chair. That's my recommendation.
So before we move forward, I'll ask if there is any discussion or dissent by the governing body on that motion. Okay, Nita, Member Decker.
So, John, thank you for that nomination and or that suggestion. I think it's a great suggestion.
Mike.
It is on. So, John, thank you for, it's still not working. Yeah, there you go. Okay. I can't look at John when I'm talking in the mic, I guess. So, John, thank you for that recommendation or that suggestion as Andy as the chair and Rob as the vice chair. I think given the departure of Jennifer, unfortunately, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it gives us some stability as a governing body member. And John and I both have a lot of things that are going on already because I would like to continue in the liaison role for a bit. So I think I definitely can support your recommendation.
Since there's no other discussion, let's move forward with a motion.
Thank you. Oh, public comment, yes.
Thank you. I was ready to move forward. First of all, anyone in the room wishing to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none. Candice, can we check and see if anyone online wishes to make a public comment?
You may make a comment by pressing #2 on your phone, or if you've joined us through Zoom, pressing the raised hand icon at the bottom of the screen. There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, and apparently Rebecca didn't want to make a public comment. So, okay, now we can go forward with a motion.
All right, thanks. So we have two parts to this motion. I'm going to read both, and then we'll take a vote on everything. So moved that the WEIM governing body elects Andy Campbell to serve as chair of the WEIM governing body pursuant to section 3.3 of the Charter for Western Energy Imbalance Market Governance, effective July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024, or until such time thereafter as a successor is elected. And moved that the WEIM governing body elects Rob Konziolka to serve as vice chair of the WEIM governing body, effective July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024, or until such time thereafter as a successor is elected, whose role will include substituting for the chair when the chair is unable to fulfill their duties due to conflicts, absence, or unforeseen reasons, and who will be designated as the WEIM governing body representative to the nominating committee. I ask for a motion at this time.
Before anyone moves a motion, I'm going to recommend that we delete the last part of that of the motion for the vice chair. So if we could just scratch the inclusion as a representative on the nominating committee. What I'm going to suggest to the governing body, we take separate action on a representative to the nominating committee. The reason being, I was just looking ahead. If I am vice chair for the next 12 months, and if I want to even be considered for renomination next year, I cannot be a member of the nominating committee.
Fair enough. Good point. So with that amendment, we will ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I'll take a vote now. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
Congratulations to both of you.
Congratulations, Andy. Oh, and John, Member Prescott would like to make a comment.
Right, I promised Rob I'd do a little embarrassment here for him, but it's a recognition of Rob's leadership over the last year. Has been phenomenal. You saw him in action this morning with his introduction. It's just amazing. And I always liked his little anecdotes at the first and information that, it gives us perspective. So I sincerely want to thank him for his leadership. And Member Campbell, he has set the gold standard for leadership. I do appreciate that. And the other thing that's important to understand is this leadership isn't just in the meetings that you see. This is almost 24/7. I mean, I've called Rob at all hours. I know others have. There's other meetings, there's other responsibilities, there's coordination for meetings and agendas and staff that goes on behind the scenes that Rob has just done a fantastic job with. So Rob, thank you very much for your leadership.
John, thank you for those comments of support, and thanks to all the governing body members. It is, as Jennifer said, it's a pleasure to serve.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Pleasure to do with Andy. Okay, so with that taken care of, let's move on to agenda item 9, which is the benefits report. And I will turn this over to Vice President Anna McKenna for introduction.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you. I will just take a brief moment to introduce Guillermo Bautista Alderete, and he will be providing you a briefing on our latest WEIM benefits and market update. And I will not say more about that. However, I will take an opportunity, since I have the mic, both to thank Vice Chair Gardner. Last time perhaps I get to say that. Thank you for your service and your guidance, and I'm quite relieved that you're not leaving the room right away. Sorry.
It only looked like that.
I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude, and both for the service you provided while in the governing body, but also for the continued partnership I hope to have with you as you engage further in the industry. So I just wanted to take that moment, and congratulations to all the changes. I won't go through all the iterations of it, but to all the governing body members, congratulations to the new positions, and thank you for all your service, continued service for that. Thought I'd just take the mic for a second. And with that, I will turn it over to Guillermo to provide you an update on the benefits.
Okay, thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. It's a pleasure to be here in person and be able to provide this briefing after a few years during remote conditions. Can we move to the next slide, please? For the first quarter of 2023, we estimated a benefit of about $480 million. That is the third largest quarterly benefits that we have seen since the inception of the Western Energy Imbalance Market. And they are well distributed across the months, across the different balancing areas. And there are main 3 drivers for those. The first one, obviously, is the transfers. By being able to clear and meet supply and demand across a wide footprint, the transfer really enabled this economic displacement of more expensive generation that you can meet now with cheaper generation from other balancing areas. That is the key component of the energy imbalance market. Compounded with that, we have additional entities. We have, over the years, added more and more entities. As of now, we have added 3 more entities: WAPA, Avangrid, and El Paso, and they add more capability for transfers across the wider footprint. These transfers, the value of the displacement is actually magnified now by the prices that we saw specifically in the month of January. You may recall that late last year, December through January, and even early February, we have quite volatile gas conditions, and that was reflected in very high prices, gas prices that in turn resulted in high electric prices. These prices magnify the economic displacement when we estimate the benefits. And these are the main drivers of how these benefits accrue that fast. Next slide, please. When we see the total since the inception of the Western Energy Imbalance Market, we are right now, well, as of the first quarter of 2023, at $3.82 billion. We do the preliminary studies. We provide this information to all the balancing areas, and I can tell you that as of May this year, we surpassed the $4 billion. We're going to be reporting this in the next quarter. And this is a good testament of the effectiveness and the value of the EIM market by being able to find the last megawatt available and be able to place it where it's most needed in an economical basis. Next slide, please. Another angle of the benefits of having this centralized market for a wider area is specifically about the avoided curtailments. In some cases, if there is no way to transfer out certain energy when we have oversupply conditions, we have to curtail that energy. The transfer capability allow us to reduce these curtailments because now we can have more exports. And for those of you that heard yesterday the update from Avangrid, it's exactly this thing. They were saying that they have curtailments over 10%, and they brought that for a fraction of a percent once they joined the EIM market. This is exactly the same picture we are portraying here. Naturally, there are some seasonal trends. We tend to see most of the curtailments during the shoulder months, in the months of January, February, March, and that is not the exception for this month. And this is just another reflection of benefits that are brought by having this centralized market that is able to fulfill needs of demand across the wider area and taking advantage of that excess of energy that may be sitting in one specific area. Next slide, please. And this is a very busy illustration, but it really highlights the power of having a centralized market to meet supply and demand in a wider footprint. This allows you to see all the capability in terms of transfers, not only between two direct adjacent balancing areas, but across the wider footprint. There may be cases where you may be bringing 1 megawatt far from the north all the way through the south, through many different balancing areas, what we call the wheel-through transfers. And this is the capability, the power of having this centralized market. Now that we have the additional new entities, Guapa, Avangrid, and El Paso, you can see in this lighter blue how they add more potential capability for the transfers. And having all these mesh loops is really the ability of the market to be able to find the optimal way to move the power across this wider area. Next slide, please. And this is actually how it materializes when we run the market. Again, this is a quite busy area, but that busy illustration actually reflects all the potential permutations of the transfers that are happening in real life in the market. Every flow stream going from the left to the right is a transfer between two balancing areas. The left-hand side is the source, where the transfer is coming from, and the right-hand side is where the transfer is going to. And the thickness of that stream reflects the relative magnitude of the transfers. When you go from the left to the right, you can see how one specific area, for example, on the top, the CAISO, all the power that is exporting, where that power is going to the right-hand side, and it is distributed among many different areas. That is the beauty of having this centralized market that can find all these optimal pathways to transfer power. Next slide, please. There are many different ways to see the transfers, and I'm emphasizing the transfer because that is the key component of the market. Naturally, we tend to see certain patterns of the transfers when you see those through the time horizon of a day. Typically in the shoulder months like now, we can see that the California balancing area tends to have a lot of solar power in the mid hours of the day, and therefore that is excess of power can be transferred as exports to many other balancing areas. That is the dotted line that you see in the lower part of the plot. In contrast, that power is going to be taken by many other balancing areas as imports, and you can see on the upper side who is taking that. In this case, for instance, in the month of February and March, much of that power was taken by PowerX. And you can see all these dynamics taking place. Next slide, please. Lastly, prices. Prices obviously play a key role in determining the benefits because it's just how much you value that displacement of power. You can see a very dramatic decline of prices going from the month of January through March, precisely because of the month of January has these implications of the gas dynamics, volatile prices, high prices. As we move towards the end of the quarter, the prices decline. And this is the time of the year when we have plenty of supply, lower levels of demand, and therefore you have the conditions ripe to have these lower prices. In addition to the CAISO and all other area prices, we also put as a context the bilateral power prices. These are the dots that we have there. These are externally bilateral transaction prices. And just to give you a reference where the EIM prices are relative to these bilateral power prices. And you can see that within a reasonable range, they track close one to another. That's all what I have for this briefing. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Guillermo, thank you for that presentation. This is something we look forward to. I think everyone really is interested in seeing not only that aggregate total value, but some of the details associated with how we're getting to that value. So I'm going to turn to the governing body members to see if there's any comments or questions. Member Decker.
So Guillermo, mine is more a comment. It's just a complete compliment for the work that you do and your team does to put this presentation together. It always kind of makes my day to see this, just to see the power flow changes and just to see who's participating. So just thank you to your team that, or you, whoever puts this together. It's just a great graphic representation of the success of the WEIM.
Thank you.
Member Campbell.
So question, Guillermo, thank you for the presentation. On this slide, like what should we learn from some of the things on here? Both there's sort of the differences between prices across different balancing areas. Like what does that kind of tell people? And also has the bilateral prices on there. What does that, what should we take from that information about the bilateral versus the EIM prices?
I can provide a couple of insights on this. The first one is the relative difference of prices among the different balancing areas. That really reflects the locational, regional nature of meeting the demand. Typically, when you have cheap power from one area, the consequence is going to be that we can export power from that area to other areas, to the point where we exhaust the transfer capability. And when that happens, we create natural price separations because we want to preserve the price signal of the cheap area with a lower price, a higher price to the area that is importing the power. That price difference reflects that nature of the price separation due to the capabilities of transfers between areas and how much the power is valued in each corresponding area. In terms of the relative comparison of the bilateral power prices that are external to the CAI, so we have no way on influencing these prices directly, this is a reflection of the dynamics of the overall West. We are able to determine the prices, and our prices are locational prices, marginal based prices that are quantified on the balancing needs on every 5 minutes. It's very precise. The bilateral powers are traded in blocks. Sometimes they are more coarse and they may tend to capture other type of dynamics. And indeed, we have had some conversations with some parties in the West trying to understand why there may be a divergence, why they may be taking different paths around the same time. But I would say overall, it's good to see that within a reasonable range, they are tracking well together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Member Prescott.
Guillermo, thank you. Good presentation. Can we go back a few slides to the one that shows the buying and selling activity with all the, yeah, that one right there. You know, when I started on the governing body in 2016, I had no idea of the success of this market. What? But when I look at this chart, I think, you know, it's worth just kind of looking at this chart, all of us, and think about, did anybody envision this would be the sort of outcome of this market when it started? You know, when Pacific Core started up with the ISO and then others started adding on and looking at it, and benefit studies were done that were generally underestimated the benefits that actually happened. And I think it's worthy of taking a break. You know, you get into the details to stop and look at this and realize what's been accomplished. And it's done several things for me. One, it's confirmation that we in the region can work together. I mean, we've all been through all the different efforts to try to make this work. Here's proof that it can work. Whatever direction these entities decide to go moving forward today, ahead and beyond, stop and reflect on what's been accomplished here. I think that is just so vital. And it's refreshing to me to have been a part of it in a small way, but also recognition for smart people on staff that have done it, the entities that have actually committed to this and make it work, and then all the stakeholders that have had a voice to make sure Bosser and others that are heard as the market develops. So I just wanted to take a few minutes and just reflect on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Prescott, thank you. Those are great observations. Guillermo, maybe they really fall into two categories of comments. One is when I look at your collection of slides, a series of slides, it starts looking more like a single BA. I hesitate to use that term, but I mean, it's melding. And your comment on Avangrid, I think was really, really positive and fruitful. And I wish everyone could see that information in when you present the information on curtailments and you know how much it's helping in reducing curtailments. And when you can get rid of constraints, I think that's what Avangrid was able to show is that they were just in the first quarter is that they were really able to get their reductions to about 10 to 15% of what they had previously before joining the WEIM. And that is really, really, I think, a strong testament to the way in which it can work. And I'm glad you brought that up. And I hope that anyone who would like to look at that further looks at the information that was presented at the Regional Issues Forum and take a look at the value that it brought to them. And I thought it was fantastic. So thank you for those remarks.
Thank you.
So at this time, let's move to public comment. And first, let's check and see if there's any public comments in the room. And so seeing none. So Candice, once again, can we check to see if there's any public comments online?
If you'd like to join the queue, click the raise hand icon or press #2 on your phone. There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Guillermo, thank you. Once again, as Member Decker said, this is something that we always look forward to, and I think it is, and as well as Member Prescott, is really bringing things home. So you go through a lot of work, there's a lot of activity, people, you know, work very hard at making this happen, and then we see what the results are. So thank you. Our next agenda item is agenda item 10, which is the governing body planning calendar. And once again, Anna McKenna, we'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chair Consioka. So I'll be walking you today through the rest of the calendar for the year and planning for the policy decision items that are coming to you. Well, today, as you know, you've already taken these decisions. There are two decisional items on the governing body business in terms of nomination and election of the members. In July, we'll be presenting to you one item under joint authority for your decision with the Board of Governors, and we'll be requesting approval to withdraw a change that was approved previously, and it's a change to the time by which EIM entities are required to update their base schedules in the real-time market. We had found previously that one of our EIM entities requested this, but upon further consideration, we don't think it's necessary to move the timeline from 45 minutes ahead of time to 30 minutes ahead of time. We're going to stick with 30 minutes. We haven't implemented the change, so this change is really just a change in authority. And because it requires a FERC filing, we will have to get your permission to do so as well. Later this year, in quarters 3 and 4, and I don't have specific dates for these items yet, but there are a couple of items I want to take notice that will be coming to you under joint as well. The first item will be a decision to make some enhancements to our billing, payment, and credit processes. And these enhancements are necessary and we're looking at them as a result of some of the bankruptcy experiences that were had by our market participants, and it would be an effort to reinforce the rules to better deal with those types of situations. We also will be asking for a decision on changes to the rules of conduct, and this is related to a request for a waiver that we recently filed at FERC to waive penalties associated with meter data submissions. And what we'll do is we'll be taking an opportunity to look at the penalties more closely to ensure that the size of the financial penalties are commensurate to the violations. And so we'll just be adjusting some of that for going forward. And with that, I have no other further items to share with you, but would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Very good. Thank you, Anna. Governing body members. Okay, Member Prescott.
Thanks, Anna. Just, and I could probably do my own research on this, but in the RIF presentation that Josh Walters did, they're going to be looking at price formation, that it's going to include probably fast start pricing and different things coming. And your calendar stops at the end of this year, but any time frame on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, and this is a good time maybe to add a little bit more color to what's happening in the Price Formation Forum. We have, over the past few months, as you know, we've been engaging with stakeholders and doing some workshopping with stakeholders, but most recently, as a result of a lot of good feedback on what we refer to as the working group structure around initiation of initiatives. And especially in those stages when the initiatives are still in a very nascent stage where you're thinking about principles, problem statements, and those things. We have several swim lanes, if you wish, with the price formation. We'll look at fast start, we're gonna look at scarcity pricing, we're gonna look at some market power mitigation efforts, we're gonna look at some bid cost recovery items related to storage. And within all those items, we'd like to initiate some working groups this year. That will help, we think, a great deal to both socialize and internalize and share on the problem statements within these various efforts. So the ISO team right now, and I've partnered very closely with Joanne Serena and her team, we're really working hard on formulating those working groups and starting those in July and August and in this next upcoming timeframe. I don't have the specific dates, so please don't hold me explicitly to those dates, but we're getting ourselves coordinated so that we can facilitate and hold and invite stakeholders in the working group structure to really explore the problem statements more closely. So that, as a result of that, it slows things down just a little bit. So you're not seeing a decision coming this year. We're not going to accelerate these decisions, but we hope that this provides a better output to it all. I'm hopeful actually that even within this year, we'll probably start getting some proposals from the stakeholder community starting to come through, and we'll be formulating those and considering. And I'll be happy to provide more updates on how these things are going later this year at your next meeting.
Okay.
And the timing as well, as it starts to solidify better.
Right. And I, like I say, I can get online and find a lot of this, but I appreciate your, a little bit more color of what's going on. And I want to applaud the use of the working groups. When the ISO decided to do that for EDAM and others, we get a lot of feedback from folks out there saying they really felt heard, and it was just a really good process. Like you say, it may slow the process down a bit, but you're going to get a better product, I think, in the end. So
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think we've seen the benefits of that already in some of our EDAM, and also taking advantage of the working group effort in the DAME. It's got a lot of good response. And there'll be, our goal is to really tailor, depending on the stakeholder initiative. Some of these, items may not be as in-depth, but really provide that opportunity where you have the meaty, in-depth stakeholder discussions that are required to really come up with good design. We had actually, I want to, kudos to Neil and his team yesterday for the IPE working group activity. It's already gotten some good feedback. Danielle had done a great job on that over the past 2 days. So we're getting a lot of good feedback. So your appreciation of that is echoed throughout the community, and I appreciate you saying that.
Thanks.
Member Decker.
So I want to back up a minute to the benefits. So when we hit 4 billion, I'm only guessing that the ISO will say, hey, we hit 4 billion, and there'll be some kind of press release about that. Is that a fair assumption?
I think Stacey,
Stacey, go ahead.
Well, I think it's going to be in the middle of a quarter, right? Is that based on projections, Guillermo?
Yes, we already surpassed that value somewhere in May. But the natural reporting that we have is by quarter. So when we release the second quarter, is going to be the natural time to advertise the information.
So I think this next report.
So what I'm wondering is, because it's nice to see how much everyone gained, or what their benefits were. But I think that the value of seeing the actual transfers, if there was a a slide of that goes out with the press release that goes along with, here's how much was gained. I think there's a lot of misperceptions about where these transfers are going because people don't see that. And I think that is, I think it would be very illuminating for some folks to understand everything's not coming to California.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's what I take away from that is the switching and the change of pattern over the day. But yeah, I think an announcement about the $4 billion would be probably at the end of July when we do the Q2 report out. And that way we can make a complete statement. We can add something about the nature of the transfers.
Okay. And before we go to public comment, may be a good time to reinforce that as of now, there is not going to be a independent governing body general session in July. We'll have the joint meeting with the Board of Governors for the approval items, and there will be also some briefing items, but not a separate meeting that the governing body has. And I'm just going to confirm. I see the head nodding. So for those of you who are looking at calendars and you don't see something showing up in July, that is the reason. Okay, very good. Let me go to public comment. Any public comments in the room? Everyone's kind of ready to wrap up. And then Candice, can we do one last check for public comments from those online?
Yes, if you'd like to make a comment, please press the raise hand icon or press pound 2 on your phone. We have no hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. So at this, informational reports is agenda item 11. Is there any questions on the posted informational reports? And there are none. I think we like the cadence of it. The material is good. And every once in a while, as you know, that sometimes there's just an item that pops up, obviously not this time. So thank you. And lastly, future agenda items. Are there anything that the governing body wants to state that's not covered? I think we've kind of vetted that out. So Anna, thank you. I think you have it covered. And I think, John, you did a good job of looking at that or asking that question on the price formation. And that really was helpful, Anna, having that breaking out, because I was looking at those big stages and I didn't see that dropping in. So that's good to know. And I do think that a lot of participants and stakeholders will be very interested in seeing that. So thank you. With that, I'm going to give the governing body's members one last opportunity if they needed to add anything. And seeing none, we concluded our business today. Thank you, and we stand adjourned.